This isn't just another podcast. We're crushing the taboos and we're rewriting the rules. It's the space where we normalize women becoming wealthy. If you're done playing small and ready to become the CEO of your life and the architect of your future, then my girl, you're in the right room. Welcome to your wealthy era. Welcome to the Wellthy CEO podcast.
At 23, Priscilla Facey bought her first home with no playbook, just instinct. A burst pipe, an insurance payout, and one bold investment later, she walked away from her 9-to-5 government job and built a real estate empire that now spans over a dozen personal properties, 2 completed developments, and 130 plus units rising across Southern Ontario. Today, she's the founder of Build Up Development Co., and she's here to show us exactly how you can build your wealth, how to protect it, and how to scale it. Welcome back to the Wellthy CEO podcast. In studio is my girl, Priscilla, who we have been yapping away without even bringing this onto the podcast that I'm like, okay, we need to tee the convo, press play, because what we're talking about is so juicy. So I'm so grateful and excited that you're here in the studio.
So glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. I'm going to just catch you guys up to speed. Priscilla and I have been sitting here talking about an event that we both were at on the weekend. We were at an event previous about at the beginning of March as well. These are all women events around business and wealth and wellness and health and alignment and all the woo-woo words.
Yes.
Okay.
Alignment.
Right?
Embodiment.
Okay. All of the things. And we just started diving into some of the money that we're actually missing on the table, but also the need for conversations like this to be happening, which is why I actually had Priscilla come into the studio today. In a previous episode that I actually just launched today, I talked about the importance of being in the right rooms.
Yes.
And you had just shared before we officially pressed play that you had not been to a women's event.
No, at my tender young age that I'll leave blank.
Right?
I was literally March years old of 2026 when I went to my first women's event. And it's crazy because I work in an industry with predominantly men. It's real estate development, it's, construction. And so there aren't spaces where I walk into where I'm surrounded by women typically. Yeah. And so a friend of mine says, hey, come out to this, this group. Let's check it out. Okay, cool. So I get there and it's crazy because the energy in the room when you're around all women, it's completely different. And you have to be at a women's event to understand this.
Yeah.
I described it as a warm blanket, right? Fresh out the dryer.
Yeah.
And so I'm in this event and I'm just seeing gaps everywhere because again, you're in a circle of women. It's wellness. It is, you have some women who are in, business coaching and VIP coaching and these sorts of things. But there didn't seem to be anyone speaking about investment, speaking about money per se. The focus tends to be on growing your business, whatever business you're in. There's a woman there doing homeopathics. There's somebody else there teaching you how to connect and grow a team. But there weren't people talking about, okay, you're going to do all this stuff to make the money, but then what happens when you've got the money? And how are you going to protect the money? And how are you going to buy assets and structure your business in a way that ensures wealth preservation down the road? And so that's where, we were talking about this gap that exists where how do we even the language of money that you were speaking about.
And this is so, it's so important because, again, you can create money, you can have all this revenue, you can bring in the income, and if it's just sitting there and you don't know what to do with it, or it makes you, sometimes for a lot of women, because they're risk adverse, seeing that number in the bank account makes them sleep better at night. Whereas the more wealth that you build, if you are structuring it properly, you will hear time and time again that wealthy people do not leave cash in the bank. There's a reserve, cash on hand, and it's still more minimal. And actually, you'll appreciate this. I'll give you a real life scenario example. Okay. About 2 weeks ago, I have clients of mine that her parents were clients of mine in Oakville. They sold their house in Oakville and they moved to Toronto in Rosedale, sold them a property down there. He used to be one of the top VPs for the bank. I won't name the bank because I don't want anybody to piece it together, but for one of the big banks in Toronto. And I've had the pleasure of working with all of his kids. And so they're putting in an offer on a new house that had like competing offers of like, there was actually, I thought there was only going to be 4. It turned out to be 16. We were one of 16. Wild. And so we were talking about strengthening, not just like obviously your price, but the closing date, but then the deposit. Okay. Right. And so she said to me, she goes, I don't have that much cash on hand. I need like a day with my investment banker to pull the cash out. We can show the statement of my portfolio. And so I said, I don't want this to feel icky, and maybe it is, but like, do you want to ask your dad? Knowing who her dad is, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's chump change. So I'm like, okay, it's like nothing, right? She called me back and she said, my dad doesn't have that amount of cash just sitting in his bank account. He has it there right now because he's going to pay his property taxes. He's like, but everything's in his investments. And that is a real-time reminder, like your money, if it's in your bank account, you're losing money, especially with inflation happening, right? Yep. Like every day that inflation goes up, our dollar becomes worth less sitting in a bank account. Yeah. And he and her both have their money in asset accounts, investment accounts, where the money is working for them and making them more money. And so even at that, like, he has whatever cash he has in the bank, but it was not significant enough that he could even have all of that to put on. And the property was $2.3 million. We were coming in at an offer at 2.6. Mm-hmm. We were going to put down like a 10%. So we were like 260,000.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So you've got somebody who's worth, tens of millions of dollars and they don't have an extra
even that liquid sitting in the account.
He's like, and you don't.
Right. Because why would you?
You don't.
Right.
Well, one, cash in a checking account is just not safe.
Right.
Because even with CDIC, the Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation, I believe they're only going to insure between 60 to 100K in any account. And so you don't leave large amounts of money. Even if you're worth 10 million, you're not going to have 250s just sitting there for, a rainy day.
Yeah.
But money has to have a job. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of, there's a lot of individuals now coming out with these big courses on how to, invest. And you've got the Dave Ramseys and you've got the, the Tori Dunlaps. And the first thing they say is every dollar has to have a job. Right. And if you don't know where your money is going to go, that's when it gets, withers away. But not only that, it's the investment. And so I oftentimes get messages from people on Instagram. Okay, hey, I'd like you to help me organize my investments. Okay, first question is, how much cash do you have? Where's your money sitting? Yeah. And what's the ROI? Right. And we hop on a call. Nobody knows. Right. Nobody knows what ROI is, how to calculate ROI, right. And they don't know how to figure out what the ROI is. So we go through their investment account statements. I had a lady, she was in her 50s, wanting to retire soon, thinking about whether to dispose of some of her real estate assets, whatnot. She pulls out her RBC statements. Okay, so easy math. I've got 100,000 sitting. Okay, what was the amount the beginning of last year? What was the amount at the end of last year? And we worked it out and she made $2,500. So on 100K, she made 2.5%. There was fine print that there was a management fee on that. So 2.5% is complete trash.
No kidding.
One.
Yeah.
But so one, she didn't know that. Two, she also didn't realize that there was a management fee that came off the top of that. So you're paying someone to do a bad job effectively. No one would keep a bad employee running. Why are you keeping somebody who's not managing? Because it's just a lack of knowledge. She didn't understand. And I'm like, you should be targeting absolute bare minimum 8 to 10%.
Thank you.
And then we're going up to, on a great year, you're doing 15, 17. I'm seeing people doing 20 if they're very tech savvy and, understand stocks and that. So, for her, it was just this like rude awakening that for all these years, she's been making so little returns.
Peanuts. Yeah.
And when you compound that, we're talking about compounding over time, sure, in 1 year, okay, maybe you've lost $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. But when you look at the last 10 years that she's been saving this money, putting her hard-earned dollars into an account, hello. And then obviously the ascension of that becomes buying assets.
No kidding. Yeah.
And so that's where people just have a lot of, they just have a lot of trouble. It's language they're not familiar with.
Yeah.
It's terminology. And it's also just, it feels scary to have to think about and understand what this actually means. But it should feel scarier to end up in a position where you're in your 50s, you're thinking about retiring, and you actually can't, mostly because your investments have been performing very poorly and you haven't bought any assets.
So a couple of things that you said that I just want to like pause, because we talk about terminology and you have said ROI probably 5 times. And for
taking it for granted,
anyone who's listening, ROI means return on your investment. Very important acronym. Okay. And to understand that. And I want to just reiterate what you shared is that you should be looking for any investment vehicles that are going to give you or yield at least an 8% return. At minimum. And today, I would say, and I'm sure you would agree, like there are, I'm going to say, safer ways to be able to actually get 8% as a return that aren't as like high risk, because that's why a lot of, especially women, will choose something where they're only getting 2.5% or they're getting 4% with your mutual funds, and that again, that 4% is an illusion, because after the fees are deducted, it's usually like 3% or less. And so it's like, you're almost better just to let it sit in a bank account, in a savings account, and not have anybody F with it, right? Like you're almost better.
There's also hierarchies to like worst place, cash under your mattress. Completely worst case, not safe.
Unless you're Italian.
Earning nothing.
Come on.
my Portuguese babysitter used to leave it in the freezer. In a Ziploc.
God, that's amazing.
So that's worst place. Second worst place is like your standard checking savings account, because you're getting absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Then you get into the, I guess third tier would be, maybe a high interest savings account that's a little bit better, 2.75 to 3.5 maybe. And then you get into actually investing.
Yeah.
And that's where, beyond just your standard mutual fund, like actually understanding, looking around at investments, things that you use every day, whether you're going to be buying stocks, people are now using AI. And so what companies can you invest in there? But it's, you want to start with the basics, and you want to start with understanding ROI and how can you earn 8% a year at minimum in a way that's comfortable and aligns, here we go.
Yeah.
With you.
So share with us, you could use this client as an example, or somebody who's listening right now that says, I could be that person that maybe I have $100K to invest. Maybe you only have $5,000 that's just liquid and is available. And they're hearing you right now and they're going, yeah, I don't want 2.5%. I don't want 4%. What would you recommend to them as like the first step or like place to invest? If
you're just starting out and, you've just got a small amount of money and you want to grow it in a way as you continue to get more savings to, add to the mix, I like to start off with, honestly, your very simple either put it in a fund or the S&P 500. I think that's a great place to start.
Yep.
It's, you've got liquidity in case you need to pull it out and move it to something else. That's where I like to start. And it's been doing on average 8 to 10% for ever. Yeah. So that's your sort of your safe. You don't need to be incredibly, investment savvy to understand it. You can read up on it, straightforward. But then when you start getting into, I like to look at things holistically. So how do you have your whole life set up? And that's where you and I were speaking earlier about, well, what are the basics? So 1, do you have some funds set off to the side for emergencies?
Yeah.
2, you've got your investments. 3, do you have life insurance?
Yes.
This is a major piece.
Yeah.
Because the number of times I unfortunately see, GoFundMe campaigns because someone passes away and their family has to raise the money.
Yeah.
Where you see situations where maybe somebody owned a home and they passed away and they didn't have enough life insurance, and now you're going through probate or doing an estate sale to dispose of the asset, and you still got to pay fees, et cetera, in order to, be able to pay the taxes on the disposition of the sale. So life insurance resolves a lot of this.
Yeah.
I often like to look at life in general as, okay, what are the things that could wipe me out? Okay. a disability, a critical illness, so there's insurance for those life events. Unfortunately, that may come your way that could really put a dent in your finances. So there's things like that it's like, as you're building, we have to protect as we go.
Yeah.
And so, you've got your emergency fund, you've got your investments, and that we need insurance to protect these things as we go.
So I love basically the 4 different, I'm going to say like portals or categories that like you've laid out. I want to ask you a couple of questions on it. When you think of the how-to, funds, S&P 500, fantastic. You're getting the best of all worlds really around the best companies, right? Are you recommending people to do this themselves? Do they need to get a broker? Should they get an app like Wealthsimple? Mm-hmm. What's kind of your favorite go-to?
My favorite go-to is honestly Wealthsimple. Okay. Even I've got, my kids, we should be getting a sponsorship here.
Right.
But no, even, there's youngers in my family too, that it's like, guys, okay, let's set up your Wealthsimple accounts. It's easily transferable from, your regular bank, move the money in, and then immediately it goes into the S&P, or if you've got, my son's into tech stocks.
Yeah.
So he's got a few tech stocks that he likes to invest in. But
time out. Can you just tell everybody how old your son is?
He's 9.
Okay. He's not 19. He's only 9.
Yeah.
Okay. Hear that. Yeah. He's 9 years old and he is learning the language of money. He's learning how money works, and he is finding things that he's interested in.
Yes.
So that he's excited about watching the stocks. Yeah. He's watching the markets. That's wild in itself. He's watching the market. So can we pause there and just let's talk about this for a second?
So it kind of started off with just him understanding about what I do and with real estate, right? And so in real estate, and I built out 27 homes in Niagara Falls, and I had, all the kids in my family, they came to site, they walked around the units after drywall stage, and they did the PDIs, they did the pre-delivery inspections ahead of the clients. And it was like, nope, there's a dent here. Oh, we got to fix this. Oh, we don't have the vents in the floor, and so I have them involved in the business. And that's where I think things start. You start involving your kids in the business. And if you don't have a business, no problem. You involve your kids in, okay, we're paying these bills now. We're going to pull up our bills online and we're going to pay them. And they need to understand how money moves and why it's important to have savings, enough life expenses to cover your bills, etc. So there's that general. And this is sort of everyday conversation. This is not like, okay, guys, it's Friday at 3 p.m. and this is what we're doing. It's like, the hydro bill came. Yeah, let's check it out. Open it up. They got to start understanding things. But more than that, it's what are they interested in? Yeah. And so for him, Pokemon is a huge thing. He collects cards. We go to the card store. He looks at the value of each card. He pulls it up on what the price is in the store relative to what it is on the valuation website for Pokemon. And then he'll get lucky and he'll have his own little collection of the high value cards. And, if he pulls like a really great card, it's like, okay. And he constantly watches the value up and down. It'll be like, oh, my $80 card just went down to $60 today. It's just like this, but you'll see him. He'll be like, oh, he's so frustrated. I'm like, money's energy. It moves. It's up, it's down. We can't get emotional about it. This is what it is.
Yeah.
But then to your point, it's like, okay, if you want to have X amount of dollars by this age, here's how we have to start doing it. Mm-hmm. And we bought the stock for 150 US. Now it's worth 170. Okay. And then 6 months later, now it's worth 210, and you see how you started off with 150 and that grew to X.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to bring kids into those conversations early so we don't end up like the laters in life where it's like, sorry, what's ROI? What? I don't get it. And I think it's just a function of, one, not feeling scared or nervous around it, understanding how money grows, and looking at people who've built massive amounts of wealth.
Yeah.
And there's everyday people. Like you don't have to be some conglomerate.
Yeah.
You just have to do these. Like if you do these 5 things, and we haven't even gotten to the major one yet, but you can end up very wealthy.
Yeah.
And have assets to pass down. But you've got to set yourself up, protect what you have. And then the next step for me is buying real estate.
Ta-da! And that's really where your story kind of begins. Mm-hmm. I mean, we kind of just jumped into a juicy conversation. So maybe let's go back a little to your origin story, because you weren't always in real estate. You have kind of like not so fun beginning, but a really unique introduction into the industry that somehow would have most people run away.
Yes.
You were like, I want more of this.
Yes.
So what happened with this pipe?
Oh, yeah.
Bring us back.
So, I mean, to start, even before we got to the pipe, I was 23 years old and I bought my first property. And I was living at home with my parents and literally like doing all these side gigs and, selling wholesale makeup and all this stuff to like save my pennies. And then I topped it up with an RSP loan and I bought a pre-construction property in Mississauga. Then I fell into really challenging times. So it was like, wait, what? I can't like just go hang out on the weekends with my friends, go out, dine out and pay a mortgage.
Yeah.
Like this isn't working.
Yeah.
And I had a student loan. What?
Yeah.
And so it got really challenging for me. And then a family friend was a real estate agent and she was like, you've got about $100,000 in equity in this house. Why don't you sell the house? We'll downsize to a condo. You want to live in Toronto anyways. This was in just outside the city. And I said, okay, sold the house, had my money, paid off my student loans. And so I'm now clear of all student loans. Yay. And then I bought a property in downtown Toronto. Working for the government, lived across the street from my condo. And I got a call one day at the office and they said, hey, there's a pipe burst in your unit. It's totally leaked out into the guy below you. Come home and I hope you have insurance. Fortunately, of course, I had home insurance. And so they paid me out $12,000. At that time, it was a lot of money to me. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get rid of these like regular countertops. I'm going to redesign the whole place. And then a friend of mine came along and he was like, no. I'm working on a project right now, pre-construction in an area called Queen West, which if you're from Toronto now, Queen West is it. But back then wasn't the thing. And so I put down on this pre-construction property and I told 8 friends about it. And the realtor showed up with the paperwork to sign, but I had sold them on, we should all be buying real estate. Like, yes, this is it. And then I started thinking about it and like, okay, well, I bought my first house and I went from, this to now making all this money. Like, why didn't I just keep that going? I thought I was just going to live in this one condo forever and that was going to be it. But it's like, even me having had the experience of making money in real estate, the thought just didn't occur because I was, busy with life. I was going out with my friends and whatever. And so it's like, okay. And so then that property became another property, bought a few more, then I started renovating properties and then I started building properties. And so it's just really important to, when you look at the big picture and in dealing with all the clients, you deal with tons of clients. I deal with clients where it's like, you take a look around and you're like, what's the single biggest wealth generator? And it's owning property. Yeah. And the amount of times that, unfortunately, grandma and grandpa passed away and, the 3 children have now inherited this $1 million home. And real estate, it's the single largest, wealth generator that you pass down. And unfortunately, if you're someone who doesn't own any property, then you're never going to experience that or have the option to hand that down to your kids.
Totally.
And
on the weekend, the same event that we were at when I was speaking on the panel, and I loved it because you were like, this was the quote of the panel, say it for the people in the back. But I had said that there's not a billionaire on the planet that doesn't also own real estate. And there's so much noise on the internet when you go on YouTube or different podcasts of people being like, just invest in the stock market, not in real estate, yada, yada, yada. Even those people that are like, just invest in the stock market, I can guarantee you, come and find me. Like, come and find me and tell me I'm wrong that they don't own real estate, because they do, right? And it is a very different tool, like you said, that it doesn't just help to generate wealth, but it preserves it, right? Yes. And you're passing it down. And it is the one commodity that has no risk in the sense that we're always going to need it.
Yes.
You're going to need somewhere to sleep. You're going to need somewhere to flush the toilet. And no matter what crypto's doing or like Bitcoin or Elon Musk is doing in AI, right? Like, as long as we're all still living on planet Earth, like he might change that.
You need a home.
You're going to need a brick and mortar, right? You're going to need a home. And so I always encourage people to acquire the most expensive thing first. Try, because it's going to continue to go up in value and you don't want to get priced out of the market. And it's actually what I'll share a personal story with you. When I had bought my first property for myself, was my home, which I shared on the panel. If I could go back to my 25-year-old self, I would buy an income producing asset first and not a primary resident. Yeah. And I started having this was probably, I don't even know what year it was, 2016, maybe 2015. Does that make sense? No, it was 2010. 2010. I started having this like nervous reaction because I not only did I buy a primary resident first, but I bought a condo first instead of buying dirt. Don't do that. And I wish we could have just a panel on that, like a full conversation on buying dirt first, especially now. Like if you are in Canada or the United States, the condo market in general is softening. Yes. Toronto, we have 30,000 unsold vacant units that the government has stepped in to basically give a handout.
That was just yesterday they announced that.
Right?
Now they're gonna come in and they're gonna take it over and they're gonna convert it to rentals. Which is a whole other conversation We want to be owners, not a renter society. Yes. So and right now there's kind of this shiny object syndrome for people who aren't in the real estate market where they're like, well, condos are at a discount right now. And although that's true, dirt is still going to be more valuable than a box in the sky. So I kind of did two no-nos, bought a primary first, bought a concrete box in the sky, which I believe you and I actually both were in the same development on Sudbury. Oh,
I was 150. You were 170, right?
I did own in that building.
Yeah. Okay, so that's where I was, just to put that in perspective.
I remember that now that you mentioned it.
And I started getting FOMO of being if I don't sell this and buy dirt right now, I'm going to get priced out, me personally, without having to go try to talk to my parents, be like, can you give me some capital? Do you want to invest in this? It was me with what I could do with the money I had. I didn't want a handout. And I think because of my background, people would expect that, that's what was going to happen. I was like, no, I want to do this myself. I don't want to be saying to my parents, to my dad specifically, can you invest in this property or I need your help? So I knew I was going to get priced out. And I bought dirt. I bought a house in Little Italy. And
oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was in 2017.
Ooh, sweet spot.
Yeah. I paid for it over asking. I was in competition and I won. And this is where I say to people all the time, as I'm sure you do, today money always feels expensive until tomorrow happens and you wish you bought yesterday.
Yes.
And so at least I knew that for myself, where I'm I paid, I think probably $30,000 over asking at the time, which felt like a lot. And then the example I shared with you today, that house ended up selling for $2.95, from listed at $2.4. So almost $500,000 over asking. Okay. Yep. So $30,000 felt like a big deal, not a big deal, in comparison to now with what you're seeing happen. But this is, and I knew I wanted to buy in Toronto first. I could have bought out in Hamilton. I could have bought out in Waterdown or these suburb communities.
No, I mean, if you are, as you said, buying dirt, if you are buying an actual brick home, you definitely want to, that's where you want to be in city center. And that's literally for sure.
And buying the location first, buying dirt, and then knowing for generations to come, that is going to always carry more value than a condo in the sky or a concrete in the sky. There's obviously exceptions to every rule. I'm talking general. I'm not talking about New York real estate, San Francisco. Those are exceptions to the rule. But in general, that's what you want to be looking at.
And a lot of people don't have the savviness or ability to buy in. And that's where, I like to say okay, if you can't. So one thing that I think a lot of people need to move away from is even the overall concept, as you said, income property. Yeah. If you can't afford to buy a home in the location that you need to live in, then rent where you need to live and buy an income property somewhere else. Yeah. But a lot of people just shy away from it overall. One, they just don't think about it that way. But two, it's sort of wait, what? My first home doesn't have to be the house that I live in. And it's yeah. Because guess what? That property, 5 to 10 years, is going to go up in value. The mortgage is going to be paid down. The tenant paid 85% or maybe all of it, or maybe you're even cash flowing. And in that circumstance, you now have an asset that's on your net worth statement that's gone up in value over time. The mortgage is paid down, and guess what?
Rent is going up.
Rent is going up. Rent, that's another thing. Always increase the rent.
Yep.
But these are just concepts that I think, 30, 40 years ago when our parents were growing up, and we're growing up with them and getting these lessons, it's a different world today.
Totally.
And we can't use, yesterday's rules to play today's game. Yep. And if you are not in the position to purchase your first home as your primary residence in the location you need to live in, that's totally fine. Yeah. Start looking elsewhere to buy an investment property. And that's where, I advise a lot of clients, and that's where they're like, oh, and that's where it's like, yeah, now it's the 5-year mark. Remember that property I told you to buy back then? And remember you bought it? That's great news, because now it's up to this much value. What are we going to do next? We're going to grab something else. We're going to pull money out of here. If you got, savings somewhere else and we can add to that, like now we've got to start building the portfolio. But the first step is getting in the game. And a lot of people are just sitting around renting and not actually, buying the asset that's going to be the thing that gets them where they need to go.
It's so crazy.
It is.
And this is why, we were talking about like being in these rooms, but having these conversations. And I was just excited to have you on because like as a female, we give more women permission to actually start asking like the how question, because like you're proof of what's possible, right? For somebody else. And I like, there's so many good things that you've said, like just even your kids, like I'm blown away by that. And I think it's phenomenal that you are doing that. Like I talk a lot about that now that I'm obviously, a mom myself. It's like so important to be integrating that as soon as possible, Yeah,
no, they have to. And it's funny because, my daughter wants to just collect money in her piggy bank. And then you've got my son who's like, you can't, the money's not growing. No, I like feeling it there. And it's like, but
see,
this is a representation of so many people. And we're unwinding this, at her young age now, but you don't want to be the one who's like, so I've got a good friend of mine owns a company. It's worth about $5 million. And she said, I have money trauma. And I know I should be investing more and making sure I'm getting good ROI, but I have a bank account. It's earning nothing. And there's $100,000 just sitting in there because when I look at it, it feels good to me.
Totally. I can name off 5 women right now that say the exact same thing.
They just like seeing the 6 digits just sitting there, but that money is not performing. You wouldn't have an employee not performing. You wouldn't have a man friend not performing.
Hello.
Why is like the money's just sitting there watching TV and eating potato chips on the couch? What's going on?
Yeah.
And so, but when you consider that 100,000 could be 110, then could be, 120. Like when you start looking at it that way, it's like, oh my God, 10 years later, this money should have been doubled. Yeah. And it's not, because I'm just wanting to have this, perception that something that feels good, but it's really just my own insecurity and my lack of knowledge about money that's not giving me the confidence to actually do something with it. Right. So.
Hey friend, if this conversation is speaking to you, please do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button and leave a review. It's how we grow the show, reach more women, and build a future where Wellthy is female. This isn't just content. This is an invitation to a new society for women. Let's rise and build it together. You talked about insurance as a protection vehicle. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so one, you want to, as a basics, I think most people understand, is you want to protect your life. So you want to leave money behind for individuals to be able to live on in your absence. And when we look at, okay, what does that mean? Okay, because people think it's really strange to take out a life insurance policy on your kids, but it's so smart because one, you're going to protect your own life. So if something happens to you, when something happens to you, your children now have money, not just for a funeral, because the amount of times I've heard someone say, oh yeah, the life insurance came in and, oh yeah, we've got a $500,000 policy so we can, have a really great funeral. The life insurance is not for the funeral.
No kidding.
Like,
don't get me wrong, like a funeral to honor the person who has passed is great. and there's way better ways to be spending your money, right? Like, and that's just that spending versus investing it. Like if you have that capital come to you, how sad is it that you just threw like
$45,000 on a nice casket?
Yeah. Like, okay. Because nobody else in the room knows how much you spent on the casket. Not a one. Right?
Yeah.
So sorry, keep going.
That's a whole nother conversation on, acting on emotion and where it makes sense to have things written out and to actually go through the effort and take care of that for your kids then. It's like, hey, I had a family member pass away and everything was already prepaid. The service, the plot, the whole thing. So that was already taken care of so that her grieving family didn't have to go ahead
deal with
that. So that's fantastic planning. But number one, protecting your own life. Number two, having a life insurance policy for your kids from birth so that, one, heaven forbid something should happen to your child, you would need to take time off. You would need to do all of these things that will cost money because now you're not in a position to work. So you want to have that. But the main reason for a child to have life insurance is so that early on they have a policy that gets paid up so that by the time they're an adult, they have a fully paid out policy. People don't understand that an insurance policy is not just something that gets paid out when you pass away. It's something that acts as, we spoke about the word leverage. You can borrow against it, much like a home. If you have a paid up $500,000 life insurance policy, you can use that as collateral for something else. And so it becomes another wealth generating vehicle, another, item on your net worth statement balance sheet that just really helps you to understand and protects you, but also is something that you can use as a backup, as a possible cash vehicle for yourself later. So it's not just life insurance though. You look at critical illness insurance, you look at disability insurance. There's just so many types of insurance. There's even corporate insurance to protect the business, and just super creative ways to use those things as wealth building vehicles long term.
And just to add to that, I think so many people don't understand the difference between, I'm going to say like insurance policies and wealth building instruments. Because although it's all in insurance, there is a difference. Like when I think of insurance just as insurance, I think of like my car insurance. Like I pay into that policy, and if I never get into an accident, I'm still never seeing that money again. Where you take an instrument like critical illness, God forbid something happens to you, at least you have the protection that you're going to receive a check every single month that's based on what your income would have been, so that your lifestyle is kind of not changing, right? And that you're protected in that way. But how incredible is it to know that if you don't use it for the 20 years that you've been paying into it, you get everything back. Like that is a very powerful saving tool. And if you need it, it's there. And if you don't, you get it all back. And then you have that capital to actually take, either pull out a different policy or invest it into something else. And so many people don't realize that. They just think, I'm pissing away money just in case, right? And so that's one thing I love about critical insurance. The other thing that I love around like the whole life policies that I think are very powerful. This is like, on Instagram when you hear, and you hear this more in the States than you do in Canada, just because Americans are so much more open about talking about wealth and building. And even though they can be more conservative, they're still very open. We're like closed book. Nobody talking about money. It's like so taboo, like, right? Yeah. Like, she said a bad word.
How much money did you make? Oh my God, I just lowered my voice. I started whispering.
Literally. Yeah. I'm like, but when you're on Instagram, you'll hear sometimes these, different people talking about, screw the system and become your own bank. And, you're like, how the fuck do I do that? Like, how do you become your own bank? This is how. Because you are paying in. It's like instead of putting your money in a savings account that's doing nothing, put it into a whole life policy that starts to not just accumulate like your savings account would, where you're putting in a certain amount every single month or every single year, but it actually does the magic of starting to compound. And then there's also dividend payouts that, you're able to also receive. And that gets put back into your policy. That's going to help to compound bigger amounts over the length of time. And as you mentioned, you can borrow against it. You can use it as leverage for a loan outside of it, but you can borrow against it and you don't need an approval. Why? Because it's your cash. You've put that cash in there. So this is where you become the bank. When you want money out of your bank account, even though we could get into those type of restrictions here that you still have to say to the banker, I want more than $5,000 cash because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Like you still have to explain yourself to RBC, TD. Whereas here, you don't have to explain it. It's your cash. It's your bank. You can go and take out that money. You don't have to qualify. It's already yours. And if you, God forbid, you were to pass, that loan that was pulled out against your policy doesn't get transferred to your next of kin, to your beneficiary, which is so powerful because you're not worried about that debt. And then you actually have your death benefit on top of that, right? That your kids or your beneficiary, if you don't have children, are going to be reap the benefits of. And this is another vehicle different than real estate that allows you to build generational wealth and pass it down tax-free to your children. And so the younger you are, the more time you have to compound. And, I had shared that example on the weekend that my daughter, if she lives to 70, which hopefully she'll be living till she's like 95 or maybe 200 at that point. Who knows?
I know.
Right? Like the world is so wild and weird, right? Yeah. Like who knows? But if she were to live till 70, the example I gave was that she will have 7.3 million tax-free to pass on to her unborn children. And she will have about $3 million sitting there that she can borrow against, she can take out if she's, wanting to go on $100,000 cruise because that's the stage of life she's in, like that's her quote unquote, her pension, like that she's able to not have to worry at 70 that she doesn't have money coming in from the government or whatever, playing it safe, that she's going to be able to have available to her, and that policy, just to put it into perspective, costs me $5,000 a year, which is nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. I feel like, when you said that at the event, and I mean, it was an event of all women, but I feel like there were women in the audience who were like, oh, I need to like make sure my son gets lined up with Koa because she's doing well. She's on her way. I love that. The unborn, the beneficiaries of the sugar mama.
But funny.
No, but this is at $5,000 a year. This is something that's completely doable.
Yeah.
And it's something that, again, this is very like niche information.
Totally.
Right? And so when you've got the proper, life insurance advisor to guide you through this, then you're going to have these things set up. And I fortunately, when I was, I probably must have been like late 20s where it was like, hey, like you don't have these things in place. Let's get you organized. And it's really, for me, it came out of being self-employed. And I was like, I left my government job and I'm like, now that I'm leaving the job that had this critical illness disability, but I now had to create all of these things for myself, but I did it at a fraction of the price. When I looked at how much money was coming off of every paycheck, and when I look at what with less money I was able to create for myself higher benefits, it's like, okay, but this is something that everyone can do and should. Typically most employment-based disability policies or even life insurance policies, it's like 2x your salary. It's not that much money. And you can fund yourself for the same amount, like $1 million policy. And then you start combining layer insurance in different ways depending on the stage of life you're at. So it's something that I've done forever, obviously going to do for my kids and going to continue doing. And one other aspect that I think a lot of people don't even realize is the critical illness piece. Like if you are even diagnosed with something, right? And a lot of people are diagnosed with illnesses that don't kill them. They're able to get treatment and survive, but you get a $500,000 check. I have a friend whose mom has cancer and he is paying, out of his yin yang to help her fund her treatment and this and that. And there's if you'd had critical illness policy, it's like, hey, here's $250K, here's $500,000. And that's going to really help make treatment a lot easier.
And your friends in Canada?
Yeah.
Say that again. Your friends in Canada.
No, the cancer
and that
treatment,
is not covered by OHIP
medication. But then on top of that, now mom can't work. And so you have to fund other expenses, on top of dealing with, a life-threatening illness. Now your life expenses can't be maintained. Like there's just, this is what it is. This is not the US. This is happening right here. So.
Right. And I think, and why I said that is because I think so many people have this misconception that like we just have healthcare for everything and everything is covered. And it's like so much actually is not covered at all.
And even if the treatment itself is covered, you still have your life gets interrupted.
Sure.
And that's one thing that people don't realize, just the impact on your own life when like you can't get up and just go to work, you know. And even it's everything. So again, keeping certain pillars in place, like if at a basic level, every 7 years, someone's buying a new real estate asset.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, you know, a house in Rosedale.
Yeah.
It can be something simple like a house in a smaller city even. You know, if every few years you're making with intention, you're like, you know what, I'm going to start building this up. By the time you are 50, 60 years old, you're going to have a multi-million-dollar portfolio. You're going to have, you know, insurance in place that's going to fund these things. You know, you'll have protected yourself against things like critical illness, this, that. Like it's not that difficult. It does take a little bit of discipline and some intentional planning, but it's not that hard.
No. And it's honestly not that expensive either. Like, I mean, you can decide the amount, but like it could be as little as like paying $50 to $100 a month. You know, it's not a huge burden to be taking on another policy like that. So
Yeah.
I feel like you need to come back because we could just keep going. I feel like there's so much stuff that, you know, we still should dive into. I would love for you to share with us one last piece of advice. I'm going to take you back to your younger self and ask you, what would you tell your 20-something self, knowing what you know now, speaking to maybe that younger generation, but also to the woman who is where she is right now? What would you tell your younger self?
I think there's nothing more sacred and valuable than being able to design the life you want for yourself. And that is a life that is, you know, it's rich and abundant, but it also includes things that really just feed your soul, whether that's travel, whether that's, you know, being able to quit a job and work in something and build, you know, your own thing that is really going to propel you. But all of that requires money. And one thing I would tell my younger self is be even more disciplined with money, purchase more assets, and invest more, because the fruits of the labor that happens at 20, 25, you're going to reap those benefits, you know, in your 40s and beyond. And so those are the lessons that I wish I had taken even a step further. And so, you know, that's what I would say to her. Let's go in deeper. Let's go hardcore. Let's, you know, build those assets even more. So, yeah.
I love that. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
If something in today's episode resonated with you or sparked a shift, tag me on IG or send me a DM. I genuinely love hearing what lands for you. And if it spoke to you, share it or leave a quick review. It helps more women find this show and step into their own wealthy era. Until next time, lead with purpose, live with intention, and stay wealthy.